Hi, this is Heather DeRome from heatherderome.com and from the sonatasampartitas.com. In this video, we're going to talk about the Siciliana from the first sonata, BWV 1001. The sonata is in G minor, and the Siciliana is in B flat. And so on. So what I want to show you in this Siciliana is how the overall form is working. It's really different from anything else in the book. In the other videos, I talk about how Bach gets his overall arch and how he has goes from the beginning single-mindedly towards a chord, usually about 2/3 of the way through, usually stops on that chord or that key, and then turns around and comes back home. Here he does that too, but actually what happens at that 2/3 of the way place is that he arrives back home, and the turnaround chord, the place that he's heading to, is G minor, and that happens quite close to the beginning in measure 8. They are long bars, so it doesn't, you do have time to work your way over to G minor and then get yourself back home. So I want to show you that, and then I want to show you how he gets home and what he does after, because there's another third of the piece where he's, it's just really, really great what's happening there. So let's have a look. So we're going to start from where he gets to G minor. So, and G minor, the main theme. And so then now we're going to head back home by a circle of fifths. G7, C minor, and then C7, F, F7, B flat, 7, E flat, going faster as the chords, and then A, D, G, C, F, B flat, F again, and not what we get. And then F, B flat, and we get it. So that's our little arrival back home. So I want to look at two things here. One of them is, what was that little deceptive cadence? Love this slurring here. This is the only time in the book, the only time ever that I've seen Bach go from a dominant chord to a predominant chord. Normally the deceptive cadences go from 5 to 6, but here we're in B flat. We have, that's 5, and then C minor, that's 2. So he's going from 5 to 2. Now in my mind, he's not actually going to 2. He's like done this build up to a cadence all the way back from here. That's how long he's been working at getting us to B flat, and he's just going to take a second shot at the cadence. And then 5, 1. Now chances are, if you've been playing this piece, you might have not caught that. You might have glossed over it because first of all, it's on a weak beat. It's not on the downbeat. Unlike if he had gone straight to, he would have landed right on the downbeat. That would have been too final. We still have a third of the piece left to go. Now, it's not at all uncommon for pieces to arrive home before the end, but those are usually the big monumental pieces, and it wouldn't work for them to just arrive home, drop you in, goodbye, we're done. Like, you have to have like a wrapping up. For example, in our book, the C major fugue, well, it arrives home several pages before the end. I think it's as long or longer than the chaconne, that piece. So then the wrapping up starts. Or the G minor fugue in our book. It's got a wrapping up thing that starts off with that. But the Siciliana is just a small dance. It doesn't need that kind of wrapping up. So let's have a look at what happens here in the Siciliana. So, okay, we're going to 5, 7, and 4, very typical, and then circle of fifths. E flat, A, D, G, C, F, B flat, E flat, and then what's happening here? It's like, normally a circle of fifths will take you somewhere, like here, earlier on in the piece, when we have A, D, G, C, F, and that's taking us to this B flat, and so that when we get, it's leading us to expect that, and then when we don't get it, it's a surprise, and it hits us like a surprise. But here, when we have this, that's what the circle of fifths took us to. It's just kind of suddenly floating and meandering. Now let's look at what happens after. Now we get G7. Now G7 feels like that's solid footing. Going to C minor, the circle of fifths again. B flat, E flat, and then it just is kind of meandering thing again. And then, yeah, now we 5, 4, 2, a 5 to 5, and then we know back where we are again. So honestly, for 7 years, I kept coming back to the Siciliana, trying to figure out what the chords were, what they meant. I thought maybe because of violin music, there's not enough strings, you can't really quite tell what Bach was thinking. I mean, it did look like there's a lot of chord changes that go by. They change on every eighth note, but they don't, like, go in this single-minded way that Bach always does. And so finally I contacted a theorist, Robert Jerdingen, who's a wonderful musician, brilliant theorist, and he told me, well, first he said, Heather, trying to make everything into a 1 or a 5 often misses the point. So point taken on that. But then he said he considers this passage to be what he calls an indugio passage, and it comes from the word indulging, and it's where the listener is basically forced to be in a kind of a busy stasis. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's really what's happening, while prolonging and avoiding a final cadence. And I thought, wow, that's just what's happening here. And he said that a lot of times there's a tonic pedal, and sure enough, there's one in the inner voice, and a lot of parallel sixths. And yeah, that it just described it exactly. And that was like a practice of gallant composers who were kind of like developing along the time when Bach was writing the sonatas and partitas. And at the end of Bach's life, I mean, the gallant practice was in full swing. He was still writing Baroque music, but he was hearing this music. And so that just blew my mind. And so I wanted to share that with you. Let's just go on. I want to show you one more thing. Here's our big final dominant. And then here, Bach only has those 2 notes. He doesn't have that for the last chord. He has this for the last chord. So what happens? What is this? E flat and C. That is F, A, C, E flat. That's the 7th and the 5th of his dominant 7th chord. But if he really only wanted those 2 notes, he would have resolved it to that. And he would never resolve it to that at a final cadence. So the bass note is a full step lower than the violin's lowest note. Violin can go down to G. We need an F. So I'm assuming that Bach was just pretending it was there. It's an honest implied note. And it's such a part of a common stock cadence that we hear it as being there. And now we arrive at the real ending on the downbeat with the main motive. So give it a try. Play it like that from the beginning. know that you're heading to G minor, where you actually get the main motive again, and then you go through your circle of fifths, and you have your deceptive cadence on 2, not 6, and then you take another shot at the cadence and you get to your tonic chord on a weak beat, and then you have this like 8 bars or so of just kind of alternating between a circle of fifths, that very familiar territory, to this sort of like unfamiliar floaty territory. And let us know what you think at sonatasanpartitas.com.